Hello everybody! Today I'm going to be talking about food preservation through the process of osmosis. Let's start with the basics. What is food preservation? The term food preservation refers to the strategy that is used to avoid bacterial growth of food. It includes methods such as canning, pickling, drying, freezing, and even the supplementation of chemical additives. This has become an extremely important aspect of the food industry as fewer people eat food produced on their own land. Most instances of food spoilage can be attributed to major causes, and one of them is that they get attacked by pathogens, such as bacteria and molds. Pathogens are microorganisms that cause diseases in plants and animals. Another way is oxidation, that causes the destruction of essential biochemical compounds and the destruction of plant and animal cells. For example, a common method of preserving food is by heating it to a minimum temperature. This method prevents spoilage by inserting compounds known as BHA and BHT to foods. These compounds are known to act as antioxidants and prevent chemical reactions that result in the oxidation of the food that tries to spoil it. In food preservation that uses osmosis, we need to know what osmosis is. So, osmosis is the net movement of water molecules that move from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration across a semi-permeable membrane. This happens when the amount of water on either side is equal and may result in a greater volume of water on one side of the membrane. If osmotic equilibrium has been reached by the solution on both sides of the membrane, they are called as isotonic solutions. The solution with the higher solute concentration is considered hypertonic until they are in equilibrium, and the one with the lower solute concentration is called hypotonic. How is food preservation done? Osmosis, as I explained earlier, is a process through which water passes through a semi-permeable membrane, like a cell wall or the skin of a piece of a fruit or a vegetable. If there is an abundance of food, it would not be possible to eat it all before some start spoiling. But one way of storing it is to use salt or sugar solution. These solution contain solutes, which are salt and sugar, and the living substance of microorganisms. For example, when cucumbers are placed into a concentration of high salt and sugar content, the processes that occur for the water leave the cucumber from a higher concentration of water, while at the same time the salt and vinegar flow into the cucumber. Since all things will flow from an area of higher concentration to one of a lower concentration. As a result, we would see that the cucumber has shrunk into a smaller state from the water it lost, but it has gained the flavors of salt, vinegar. How can it be helpful? Food preservation can be helpful in numerous different ways, and one of the ways is that it prevents people from throwing away their food. It can be stored for a long period of time depending on the food, but if it's kept for an extremely long period of time, organisms such as bacteria would start forming and it would also create a really bad smell. Many people in this world also don't get the proper amount of food to eat, or sometimes they sleep with an empty stomach. But if we waste food, it will lead to a lot of food loss, and it's completely unfair that they don't get food, but we're here wasting the food that they can also use to eat. Another reason can be that if we preserve food, it can be used when we are in a difficult situation. Like if there's a huge typhoon hitting your place soon, then you should most probably store food for yourself and your family if your house gets damaged, as there won't be electricity supply and you can definitely not cook food. How does salt and sugar help in preserving food? Like foods that contain a high amount of sugar solution, or even food that gets preserved by salt, can have many methods to do food preservation. When it comes to preserving food, there are many varieties. For example, meat and vegetable products are preserved by salt and sugar, while fruits and jellies are preserved by a high sugar concentration. The use of sugar and salt are very similar for the uses of preserving food, but it depends on what kind of food is being preserved. If they are both added properly onto the food, there are chances where the food may not only last for years, but it may also last for decades. To do this, you need to keep the food in a clear container, then add sugar or salt, and then cover it up to store it in a dry place. The purpose of the salt and sugar is to absorb the fluids of the microorganism which can be found in the food. This will help prevent them from multiplying and releasing harmful toxins, which have a high chance of causing the food to rot and decay. In ancient times, food were left to dry, but the system we use nowadays is much better than before. This dried food would then be used during the winter months when there's a scarcity of food. This process of preserving food by using salt and sugar has been used since the time when people didn't have any knowledge or memory of it. This kind of practice is still done at various homes and even in tribal communities. Advantages and disadvantages of food preservation. Food preservation has many advantages and disadvantages, but I'm only going to be focusing on the main ones. So, one advantage of food preservation is that we can be able to store food for a long amount of time for later purposes, or maybe we can also ship the food to different countries to either like send them to your relatives or your family back in your home country if you live overseas. And a disadvantage of food preservation might be that the container you store your food in might have some side effects, or maybe it may not be fully closed, so they might not always taste as good as the fresh food did. And thank you for listening to my video, and I hope you enjoyed.